He woke up frozen to the bone, staring at a ceiling he had never seen before. Shivering violently in a high-tech captain's chair, the icy air hits his face like a physical blow. His heart hammers against his ribs as he desperately rubs his eyes, trying to make sense of the metallic command deck surrounding him. This isn't his room, this isn't a dream, and the terrifying chill gripping his body is entirely real. Staring out into a breathtaking abyss of stars, he clenches his tactical glove and realizes everything feels far too tangible to be an illusion. He is trapped inside a massive panoramic cockpit drifting through deep space. Panic begins to mount as his mind races backward to piece together how an ordinary guy went to sleep in a cramped apartment and woke up at the helm of a starship. Just yesterday, his life was completely ordinary. He came home from a long shift, ate a cheap convenience store box meal, took a hot bath, and sat down at his PC to play video games before drifting off to sleep. But as he retraces his final moments of consciousness, a sudden spark of recognition hits him. The hyper-advanced ship he is sitting in right now is identical to the gaming rig he was just operating. The shocking truth crashes down on him. This is the Krishna, his absolute favorite flagship from Stella Online, a legendary space sim RPG known for its boundless freedom. In that world, players can buy massive cargo hulls to build galactic merchant empires or take up arms as elite pilots to explore the farthest reaches of an uncharted universe. Back on Earth, he wasn't a traitor. He was a hardcore mercenary player who poured endless hours into mastering high-stakes dogfights. He grinded through multiple starter ships, pouring every single credit into acquiring this exact beauty, the elite ASX-08 Krishna. Now, he isn't just controlling it with a keyboard and mouse, he is physically standing on the deck of his ultimate digital weapon. The romantic thrill of owning a starship vanishes when he notices the internal temperature is dangerously low. Hurrying over to the terminal, he activates the generator and boots up life support just in time. The display flashes a grim 12 degrees Celsius, proving that if he had slept even an hour longer, he would have choked to death in the freezing dark. With his immediate survival secured, he sinks back into his pilot's seat, resting his chin on his glove as deep anxiety creeps in. He pinches his cheek and focuses on the steady warmth returning to the room, realizing there is absolutely no sign of waking up. If this were a lucid dream, he would have broken character by now, leaving him completely trapped in a video game universe. He lets out a loud laugh, throwing his hand up to dismiss his mounting dread. Worrying about how he got here won't change the fact that he's currently drifting in the void, so it's time to stay positive. Leaping up from his chair, he throws his hands onto his hips and shouts words of encouragement to the empty room to pump himself up before taking the manual controls. Grabbing the flight joysticks and planting his feet onto the pedals, he gently pushes the thrusters forward. To his amazement, the Krishna responds instantly, gliding through the cosmos with razor-sharp precision. Controlling the ship with his own physical movements feels incredibly intuitive, but his excitement hits a massive roadblock when the navigation array flashes a warning, "No data." He looks at the terminal in disbelief, realizing the entire galactic map has been completely wiped clean. Not only is he totally lost, but his bank account reads an absolute zero. He has a small stockpile of survival rations, but to survive long-term, he will have to mine rare metals, the most highly valued commodities traded for electronic currency across the galaxy. He thought he was just testing the flight mechanics of his favorite video game, but space is a ruthless place. A massive crimson alert overrides his entire dashboard, casting an ominous glow across the cockpit. Sirens wail through the dark cabin as an automated computer voice reveals the terrifying truth. An unknown starship is actively scanning his position. He barely has time to process the intrusion before an unfamiliar channel forces its way onto his comms line, demanding his immediate attention. A scarred, heavy-set space pirate flashes on the main viewer, demanding to know what a lone vessel is doing idling out in the open void. Recognizing the threat instantly, our pilot tries to play it cool with a polite wave, acting like a harmless traveler just passing through. But space scum don't take polite for an answer. The raider demands a heavy cut of his cargo, completely unaware that his target isn't a helpless merchant, but a lethal mercenary who has survived 1,000 dogfights. A quick scan of the radar confirms the enemy's formation, showing 3 poorly maintained pirate ships closing in fast. The raider smiles on screen, promising to spare his life if he surrenders his cargo without a fight. Our protagonist goes completely silent, letting a cold, focused expression wash over his face. He doesn't say a word as he grips the flight stick, completely disregarding the surrender demand as the 3 hostile ships take their positions around him. The pirate leader smirks, convinced the lone target has accepted his fate. But our hero looks on with icy determination, whispering a quiet apology to the raiders before committing to the fight. He slams his hand forward, locking the joysticks into combat mode as the Krishna's thrusters ignite with blinding intensity. The heavy ship surges ahead, moving with an agile speed that completely defies its massive build. The flagship blasts through the vacuum of space like a meteor, shattering the pirate's tight formation in a fraction of a second. Inside his cockpit, our mercenary grins as the crushing G-force slams him into his seat, completely fueling his adrenaline. The outlaws are thrown into a complete panic as the massive vessel weaves effortlessly through their firing lines, turning a simple ambush into an absolute slaughter. The pirate captain's jaw drops in utter disbelief as the terrifying speed of the target leaves him breathless. Before the raiders can even pivot their weapon arrays, the Krishna's heavy gun ports slide open, revealing pristine military-grade laser cannons. The barrels glow with surging energy before unleashing a barrage of blinding energy beams that tear right through the dark sky. The concentrated laser fire strikes the lead escort ship dead center, punching through its defensive shields like paper. A violent chain reaction rips through the hull, bursting into a massive fireball that illuminates the empty void. In a single, effortless trigger pull, one of the pirate ships is completely vaporized, leaving nothing behind but scattered space debris. The remaining outlaws lose their minds on the comms, screaming in terror as they realize their target just transformed his ship into a lethal weapon. The second escort vessel tries to break away, but our hero locks his sights onto the fleeing target with ruthless precision. He deploys the ship's heavy ballistic railgun, charging the weapon up as the panicked pirate screams that he doesn't want to die. The railgun fires with a deafening shockwave, sending a high-velocity slug tearing through the second raider's hull and detonating it into a cloud of cosmic ash. With 2 of his ships reduced to stardust, the pirate captain can only watch in absolute horror. He grips his controls with sweating hands, his arrogance completely shattered as the lethal mercenary ship turns around to face him. Driven mad by vengeance and fear, the pirate captain screams into his comms, swearing to kill the mercenary as he launches his final assault. He unleashes a barrage of homing missiles, but our hero calmly tracks the incoming projectiles on his tactical display. With a flick of his wrist, he activates the Krishna's point defense lasers, intercepting the missiles mid-flight and detonating them harmlessly against the void. The pirate leader completely loses his mind, shrieking in terror at the video monitor as his comms feed glitches out. He violently slams his auxiliary thrusters to retreat, but the mercenary closes the gap in the absolute blink of an eye. With a cold glare, our pilot fully charges his main laser cannons, shredding the raiders' shields under a mountain of immense power. The massive target is completely pinned against the void, utterly helpless against the oncoming storm. Driven mad by desperation, the pirate captain unloads a final chaotic barrage of missiles to buy himself some time. But our hero doesn't even flinch, weaving the Krishna through the incoming fire with flawless precision. With a quick flick of his wrist, he deploys his internal heavy gun ports, locking onto the enemy hull as the raider completely panics at the sight of the elite military weaponry. The raider screams for him to stop over the open comms channel, but his pleas are instantly cut short. Our pilot pulls the secondary trigger, unleashing a devastating close-range kinetic blast that punches straight through the target vessel. A violent chain reaction rips through the hull, detonating the entire pirate flagship into a spectacular, blinding fireball that completely illuminates the dark sector. The high-stakes battle ends in a flash, leaving behind nothing but drifting scrap metal in the empty void. Inside the cockpit, the crushing physical toll of the dogfight finally catches up to our protagonist as he gasps for air. The intense, raw G-force leaves him completely lightheaded and holding back intense motion sickness. realizing the game's gravity dampeners don't perfectly shield his body in this reality. As his stomach churns, he relies on his sheer willpower to steady his hands on the flight sticks. He stares out into the infinite expanse of space, watching a massive star glow against a breathtaking nebula. The absolute scale of the cosmos confirms the ultimate truth. This isn't a simulation. This is a physical living reality. Marooned millions of light years away from his old apartment, he sinks back into his chair, trying to process the sheer gravity of being physically stranded inside his gaming avatar's ship. But as he takes a deep breath, he realizes that being stuck inside a fully optimized top-of-the-line flagship is the ultimate survival cheat code. The Krishna boasts nimble maneuverability that easily matches an elite interceptor, but packs the raw, devastating firepower of a heavy cruiser. Since he already completely understands the exact meta strategies of this universe, he decides he can easily dominate this galaxy as a high-tier mercenary. He brings up his console to scan the aftermath, discovering that the sector system has automatically registered a massive 19,000 credit bounty for wiping out the outlaws. Better yet, his automated recovery drones harvest an intact data cache from the smoking wreckage. Downloading the corrupted files reveals the hidden coordinates to an active space pirate base, giving him an incredibly valuable map that will fetch an absolute fortune on the open market. He opens up his navigation array to locate the nearest civilized trade colony where he can cash in his newly acquired bounty logs. His long-range sensors immediately lock onto a colossal, ring-shaped space station orbiting a nearby planet. Without hesitating, he engages his primary thrusters, charting a direct course for the sprawling metallic metropolis to secure his first official paycheck. The Port Authority of the massive space station accepts his docking request, guiding the sleek vessel directly into the arrival bay. However, the station's computer flags a critical error, stating that his pilot registration profile is completely corrupted and unreadable. He quickly decides to drop his old Earth identity entirely, knowing that a regular Japanese name will never fit into this futuristic sci-fi universe. He stands tall on his command deck, letting a confident, daring smile wash over his face as he prepares to forge an entirely new destiny among the stars. He transmits his official choice to the colony's central database, permanently linking his life to his legendary vessel. With an absolute look of determination, he introduces himself to the star system as Captain Hero, a lethal new mercenary pilot ready to take the galaxy by storm. He thought he was entering a safe trading colony, but instead, he walks straight into a high-stakes interrogation room. An officer stares him down with deep suspicion, aggressively questioning how a lone pilot suddenly showed up with a cargo hold completely overflowing with priceless rare metals. Hero scrambles to explain that he just took down a squad of space pirates, but without an active mercenary license or identification, the officer isn't buying a single word of his story. The tense interrogation is suddenly cut short as the door slides open, revealing a striking, high-ranking military woman named Miss Serena. The arrogant officer freezes in sheer shock, completely sweating through his uniform as he scrambles to understand why a noble commander has entered a standard holding cell. Serena pays him no mind, casting an icy, analytical gaze onto Hero, who instantly realizes that his situation is about to get a whole lot more complicated. While the officer panics, Hero casually offers a polite wave, trying to keep his composure in front of the formidable new commander. Serena looks over the digital manifest, noting that the sheer volume of high-grade rare metals he brought in is staggering for a single traveler. She asks point blank if there's anything shady going on, but Hero just smiles, completely keeping his cool as he claims absolute innocence. Hero sarcastically explains that he actually came to the station to be a good citizen, intending to turn over highly classified space pirate coordinates that he recovered from the wreckage. He throws his hands up in mock exasperation, recounting how the Port Authority instantly dragged him into a holding cell the moment he tried to claim his honest bounty. The officer looks on in absolute silence, completely caught between Hero's smug defense and the crushing presence of the female commander. Serena turns to her subordinate with an icy glare, demanding to know if there is any actual proof that the cargo was acquired illegally. When the officer stammers out a pathetic refusal, she completely shuts him down, declaring that the station has absolutely no problem here. She points out that the colony gets top-tier metals at a fair price while the pilot spends his hard-earned electronic currency right here in their markets, making the entire trade a massive win for everyone involved. The officer desperately tries to argue his case, but Serena cuts him off entirely with a sharp, sinister smile. She mentions that she has been tracking deep corruption within the station's staff, specifically targeting rogue officers who are harassing incoming ships to demand illegal bribes. The officer's face turns completely pale as she leans in closer, asking Hiro with dark amusement to report anything he might find out about these corrupt sector workers. She stands tall, dropping a massive bombshell by revealing her true identity as the elite daughter of the legendary Marquis Hors. The corrupt officer completely loses his mind, sweating profusely as he stammers out a series of terrified salutes. He screams that he will handle all the arrival formalities perfectly, completely running out of the room to save his own skin, while Hiro looks on with a completely deadpan expression. Now, with the corrupt officer successfully driven away, Serena lets out a soft sigh and immediately offers Hiro a polite apology for the staff's overzealous behavior. She pulls up her digital tablet to process his clearance, but her eyes narrow as she looks over his official pilot registration profile. She notes with deep suspicion that his entire database file is completely blank, containing absolutely zero personal history outside of his newly registered name and flagship. Hiro's heart completely stops as she drops her final observation, casually noting that his lack of data makes it seem like he literally wandered into their universe from a completely different dimension. Hiro's eyes widen in sheer panic as the absolute gravity of her sharpness hits him like a physical blow. He forces a sweat-drenched laugh, desperately waving his hands to dismiss the comment while realizing this brilliant commander is far too dangerous to underestimate. Sensing her intense gaze, Hiro quickly pieces together a flawless cover story, attributing his lack of records to a catastrophic hyperdrive accident that left his memory completely hazy. He spins a dramatic tale of how a ruthless squad of space pirates misjudged his flagship as easy prey, only for him to completely vaporize their fleet in self-defense. Serena listens intently, her expression softening into genuine intrigue as she realizes this mysterious pilot might just be the most lethal mercenary in the star system. Serena strokes her chin thoughtfully, admitting that a hyperdrive accident causing complete memory loss is a bit hard to swallow. She narrows her eyes, delivering a cold truth. Without any official records, the main military branch is going to assume he's a covert operative. Hiro freezes in sheer panic as she bluntly tells him he's on the fast track to being accused of acting as a spy for the hostile Bellabarum Federation. Serena lays out the cold facts, pointing out that an unidentified pilot showing up with a massive fortune in rare metals of unknown origin looks incredibly suspicious. Hiro desperately tries to laugh it off, arguing that if he actually were a professional operative, he would have found a much stealthier way to infiltrate their systems rather than pulling up to their front door. He flashes a charming smile, but internally his sweat breaks out as he wonders if he pushed his luck too far with his defense. The tense room instantly relaxes as Serena breaks into a warm, cheerful laugh, admitting that his logical point is exactly what she was thinking. Her intense suspicion melts away entirely as she smiles brightly, offering a polite apology for taking up so much of his valuable time. She steps back, assuring Hiro that she will personally contact the main office to sort out his documentation and clear his name from any false accusations. Before leaving, Serena kindly advises him to see a trusted medical specialist to check out his amnesia, promising to introduce him to a reliable doctor. Hiro smiles warmly and accepts the offer, waving goodbye as she exits the holding cell. But the second the door shuts, his friendly mask slips, and he drops his head into his hand, letting out a massive sigh of relief while thinking that she is undeniably beautiful, but absolutely terrifying. With a stylish tip of her military cap, Serena bids him a pleasant farewell until their next meeting. The automatic heavy door slides shut with a metallic thud, leaving Hiro completely isolated in the quiet interrogation room once again. He stands frozen with his hand still raised in the air, blinking in utter disbelief at how fast a high-ranking noble completely took control of the situation and left him in her wake. Once his official clearance goes through, Hiro rushes straight to the station's main financial terminal to cash in his hauls. He looks down at his digital tablet as the transaction clears, and his eyes completely pop at the numbers reflecting on the screen. The terminal awards him a staggering 150,000 credits for the pirate base coordinates, roughly 10,000 credits for the bounties, and an absolute fortune of 2.5 million credits for the rare metals, bringing his grand total to over 2.6 million enel. Knowing that a single credit translates roughly to about 100 Japanese yen, his jaw completely drops as he does the quick math. He realizes he is sitting on an absolute mountain of wealth that could easily fund a comfortable, luxury life on this station for the next 40 years. He looks up at the ceiling in complete disbelief, reflecting on how his entire life up until yesterday was a dull, exhausting grind working as an enterprise network manager. Back on Earth, working himself to the bone only led to a thoroughly uninspired, lonely routine where video games were his single source of joy. He was an absolute gaming omnivore, conquering everything from Japanese RPGs to complex Western space simulators, until he successfully climbed into the top 10 global rankings of Stella Online. He lets out a loud, ecstatic shout right in the middle of the crowded station lobby, throwing his fists in the air and cheering about how incredibly happy he is to be trapped in this universe. With his financial future completely secured, Hiro immediately heads over to the high-tech hangar bay to check on his pristine flagship, the Krishna, which is being fully serviced by the station's mechanical docks. He uses his newly acquired fortune to purchase a massive high-end steak meal, shoving a huge, juicy piece of meat into his mouth. Sitting at the diner counter, he chews happily, completely satisfied with his new reality as he wonders what exciting adventure he should tackle next. He brings up his star map terminal to review the local galaxy, deciding that he has no intention of just sitting back and coasting on his millions. His data logs show he is currently stationed within the Termain star system, a strategic sector composed of a roaring primary star, an asteroid belt, and 4 distinct planets. Panning through the planetary profiles, he notes that Termain 1 is a scorched rock, Termain 2 is a rich gas giant filled with deuterium, the asteroid belt is a golden mine of rare metals, and Termain 3 is a resource-heavy world trapped under a toxic atmosphere. Hiro soon discovers that while the Termain star system is incredibly rich in natural resources, its harsh planets are completely unsuitable for human habitation. As a result, the entire local population lives aboard massive, high-tech space colonies. This setup creates a massive amount of heavy traffic from commercial cargo merchants and mining vessels across the sector. But at the same time, this chaotic influx of vulnerable cargo hulls creates exactly the sort of environment space pirates love to exploit. Fortunately, a sector plagued by constant pirate raids means that an elite mercenary will never have a hard time finding a lucrative contract. But as Hiro scans his tablet, the political breakdown of the local star map reveals a much deeper threat. The Termain system currently sits under the strict jurisdiction of the powerful Graken Empire. However, the border regions share a direct, highly volatile boundary line with their neighboring rivals, the Bellaburum Federation. Geopolitical data shows that relations between the two massive superpowers have been incredibly tense for many consecutive years, resulting in constant military skirmishes along the border zones. Hiro realizes that if he settles down in this system long-term, he will inevitably find himself dragged directly into a full-scale interstellar conflict. While fighting a professional state army could yield massive combat payouts, it is far too risky compared to hunting disorganized space pirates. Looking closer at the database, a vague, unsettling feeling begins to take root as he cross-references the lore of Stella Online. He notices key inconsistencies, realizing that the Graken Empire and the Bellaburum Federation didn't even exist in the video game version of this sector. Finishing off the last bites of his steak, Hiro sets his fork down onto the empty tray and decides not to make any reckless moves just yet. Since his bank account is completely loaded with millions of credits, he still has plenty of time to sit back, observe the system, and plan his next move. Deciding to stretch his legs, he steps through his ship's airlock and heads out into the colony's main residential sectors to stock up on fresh supplies. Stepping out onto the main promenade, Hiro stops dead in his tracks and lets out a breath of pure astonishment. He looks up at a sprawling, vertical cyberpunk landscape that stretches endlessly toward the upper rings of the colony's interior hull. Massive architectural blocks, neon displays, and intricate metallic pathways stack on top of one another, creating a breathtaking sci-fi metropolis that defies imagination. He notes that while he is thoroughly used to seeing these exact types of futuristic settings in anime and video games, physically experiencing it with his own eyes is exhilarating. But as he walks along, his presence catches unwanted attention. He looks down to realize two men are standing nearby, their eyes fixed directly on him as he passes by. As he continues down the street, he realizes a group of 4 sketchy individuals are loitering by the wall, eyeing him up. Hiro remembers reading a guide warning that this section of the colony isn't very safe, especially for someone acting like a completely clueless tourist. He scratches his head in irritation, knowing he's bound to attract trouble if he keeps letting his guard down. Realizing he needs to ward off any potential threat before it starts, Hiro rests his hands on his waist and shifts his jacket aside, deliberately revealing the heavy military gun resting in his holster. The group of 4 thuggish men stare at the high-end weapon, their tough expressions instantly turning to sweat-drenched panic. Realizing they just targeted an elite mercenary, they audibly click their tongues in frustration and immediately back away. Hiro lets out a tired sigh and adjusts his clothes, muttering about what a hassle the local crowd is. But before he can even take another step down the alleyway, a sharp voice suddenly calls out to him from behind, calling him a newbie. Hiro glances over his shoulder in surprise as a mysterious woman approaches him, sporting a confident smirk as she compliments his nice sidearm. The mysterious traveler introduces herself with a cheerful wave, winking as she welcomes him to the lower sector. Hiro stands frozen, his eyes widening in pure shock as he gets a closer look at her distinctly pointed ears. He panics internally, wondering if his beloved space simulator, Stella Online, secretly featured hidden fantasy elements. He quickly tries to rationalize it, guessing that if she is actually just an alien species, a humanoid appearance with classic elven traits makes perfect scientific sense in this universe. The pointed-eared girl proudly rests her hands on her hips, laughing off his tense posture and assuring him that there is absolutely nothing to be afraid of. She reveals that she is a fellow mercenary just like him, but her friendly demeanor quickly shifts when she catches him staring intensely. She scolds him for being incredibly rude, but Hiro deadpans, stating it's common sense to be wary when someone leaps out of an alleyway. When she demands to know exactly what he is looking at, Hiro casually mutters that he was just analyzing the massive gap between her inflated conceit and her incredibly small flat chest, causing her to instantly blush in absolute fury. Embarrassed and angry, she loudly snaps back to demand what he means by calling her conceited. Hiro plays it cool, brushing off her anger by asking what a professional space mercenary wants with a complete newbie like him. Clearing her throat to hide her blushing face, she boldly declares that she wants him to accompany her while she kills some time around the colony. She explains that she originally traveled to this star system because military tensions were flaring up. But since the local governments aren't officially contracting independent mercenaries yet, she is stuck loitering. Hiro finds her spontaneous guiding offer highly suspicious, but decides that following an eccentric space elf is the perfect opportunity to learn about daily life here. As they stroll down the vibrant cyberpunk street, she smiles and notes that she still hasn't properly introduced herself, proudly revealing her name is Elma. When she asks for his name in return, he keeps it brief, simply replying that he goes by Hiro. Elma chuckles, teasingly pointing out that Hiro is an incredibly plain and simple name. Hiro confidently fires back that her name is just as basic as his, but Elma dismisses his sass with a cheerful grin, telling him it's completely fine as long as they understand each other. Brushing off the playful bickering, Elma beams with excitement and orders him to fall in line right behind her. She proudly declares that as his senior mercenary veteran, she will be leading the way through the sector. Hiro lets out a subtle, amused smirk, completely relaxed by her energetic personality as he trails along. He gives her a casual nod, stepping forward into the crowded city streets as he officially embarks on his very first adventure under the guidance of his lively new companion. Elma's face turns completely red as she gapes in absolute disbelief, screaming out to confirm if he is actually operating completely unlicensed. Hiro sweat drops nervously, asking if it's really that bad that he isn't registered in the Mercenary Guild yet. Elma aggressively gets up in his face, shouting that an unaffiliated owner of a battleship isn't that much different than a pirate, meaning they need to get to the guild right now. As they walk toward the facility, Hiro strikes up a conversation to learn more about his guide, asking if she has been a mercenary for a long time. Elma puffs out her chest proudly, declaring that she is a seasoned 5-year veteran of the trade. Hiro glances down at her youthful appearance, commenting that she must have started when she was very young if she's already a veteran at 53 years old. Elma looks back with a beaming, cheerful smile, casually reminding him that while humans have a short lifespan, her race easily lives for around 500 years. Hiro freezes up in completely deadpan shock, staring at her in silence. Realizing she just accidentally highlighted her decades of stagnation, Elma turns around and screams at him in blushing fury, shouting that her age doesn't matter at all. She aggressively stomps away, fuming that it is bad manners to pry so deeply into another mercenary's past. Hiro watches her storm off, sweating nervously as he notes that something very bad must have happened in her past. But the second they step through the main entrance of the Mercenary Guild, Elma instantly snaps back to a bright, cheerful demeanor, happily waving and introducing him while a completely stunned Hiro tries to keep up with her wild mood swings. The imposing guild receptionist slams his hand onto the counter with a loud bang, shouting out in complete disbelief when he hears the news. He narrows his eye, demanding to know how an unlicensed newbie thinks he can operate. Elma places a hand on Hiro's shoulder to smooth over the tension, flashing a brilliant smile and explaining that while he isn't registered in the guild yet, he has been actively working as a mercenary anyway. The guild worker sighs and tells Elma to shut up, before turning to Hiro and demanding that he submit his ship name and ID to the terminal. Elma giggles to herself, teasing Hiro about how scared he looked during the initial confrontation. But as the receptionist reviews the incoming data on his monitor, his tough expression completely vanishes, replaced by utter bewilderment as he admits he has never seen this ship before, noting there are almost no records of it stopping in any ports. Hiro forces a nervous laugh, quickly spinning his cover story by claiming his data must have gotten corrupted during his recent catastrophic hyperdrive accident. While the receptionist notes that the explanation is incredibly convenient, he shrugs it off, stating that mercenaries don't pry into each other's past anyway. He punches a few commands into his terminal, declaring that everything is ready and it's time to put the newcomer through a formal combat test. Hiro is led into a massive facility lined with a row of high-tech capsule chambers, which the receptionist explains are advanced simulators used for training. The worker sits down at his monitoring console, explaining that they can't accurately assess his combat abilities or allocate contracts just by taking his word for it. He points toward pod number 4, telling Hiro that they've loaded a combat profile tailored to replicate the capabilities of his specific ship. As Hiro prepares to enter the pod, the guild receptionist tells him to choose his preferred combat settings, prompting Hiro to confidently give his approval. Hiro looks back to see Elma sporting a highly mischievous, smug grin, causing him to ask what she's so amused about. Elma giggles, teasingly claiming that she just wants to see how awkward he looks inside the simulator, before correcting herself to say she just wants to see how good he really is. Hiro lets out an annoyed sigh, stepping onto the metal staircase of the capsule as he prepares to show them exactly what he can do. The automated simulator door quickly slides open, and the receptionist casually announces over the comms that Hiro has passed the test. Hiro casually strolls down the metal steps, waving his hand and muttering that it was great, while Elma stands at the bottom of the platform looking on in absolute wide-eyed shock. Back at the desk, the seasoned guild worker stares blankly at his monitor, completely sweating through his uniform as he looks over the unprecedented data results in disbelief. The receptionist explains that he intentionally started the simulation at a standard beginner program, but gradually increased the difficulty tier as the pilot cleared each wave. Hiro casually comments that while it was getting tougher by the end, he didn't really feel much of a threat. The worker's jaw completely drops, frantically explaining that the final wave he casually cleared was actually the legendary Gold Ascension program. He brings up a pyramid diagram tracking the combat strength of mercenaries, which ranks pilots from Iron all the way up to Platinum, revealing that this complete nobody just effortlessly bypassed the entire system. The Mercenary Guild receptionist looks straight at the newcomer, flatly explaining the cold reality of the ranking system. He states that while Hiro's combat data is great, he can't just hand over a high-tier gold license all of a sudden without any actual achievements. Hiro stands calmly, simply replying that he gets it. The receptionist leans forward slightly over his computer terminal, sweating as he offers a compromise, declaring that for now, Hiro will start at bronze rank so he can rank up as he shows results. Hiro flashes a confident, wide grin, closing his eyes as he enthusiastically tells the receptionist that he prefers it this way. He explains that starting from the bottom is much better because giving him gold right away would completely ruin the fun of ranking up. The receptionist can only sweat drop at the newcomer's laid-back attitude, muttering a stunned agreement. But as Hiro speaks, he senses a heavy, suffocating aura from the side. He glances over to find Elma staring daggers at him, her face completely flushed with a mix of intense embarrassment and pure, unadulterated rage. Elma completely snaps, stepping aggressively forward with her hands clenched at her sides as she screams out her frustration at the top of her lungs. She fiercely reminds him that she has been doing this for 5 years, and she is still only silver rank. Hiro recoils in absolute deadpan shock, his face going completely blank as he watches her furiously pout and growl with sharp teeth. Sweat trickling down his neck, Hiro looks away, mentally noting that this is going to be a pain. Desperate to break the incredibly tense atmosphere, Hiro suddenly puts on a cheerful, smiling face and shifts the conversation, loudly announcing that he wanted to stock up on food. He walks ahead, looking back with a sly glance as he loudly sighs about how he doesn't know a lot about this colony. He casually wonders out loud how nice it would be if an excellent senior mercenary would lead him to a good grocery store. Hearing her status praised, Elma's angry pout instantly vanishes, replaced by a massive, triumphant grin as she falls for the bait. Elma completely flips her attitude, closing her eyes happily as she boasts that a newbie who can't tell left from right really does need an excellent senior veteran. Pointing a confident finger forward, she commands him to follow her, proudly declaring that she will guide him somewhere she likes. Hiro can only look on with a totally deadpan, exhausted expression, muttering to himself about how incredibly simple she is. He trails behind her as she cheerfully hums and skips down the futuristic corridors, leaving the docking facility behind. Elma leads him through the colony, stopping directly in front of a massive storefront with a large sign reading Oishii Mart. Stepping inside, Hiro looks around the sprawling, clean interior, which features high ceilings, organized shelves, and automated shopping carts. Walking down the wide aisles past canned goods and synthetic packages, Hiro turns to his guide and asks what she recommends. Elma stands with her hands behind her back, explaining that if he has cookware, food cartridges are the way to go, or he can get artificial meat if he isn't worrying about money too much. Hiro places a finger to his chin, casually asking about normal meat and vegetables, prompting Elma to gasp in absolute shock. She loudly tells him that only the richest people can eat that stuff since farming in a colony is inefficient, prompting a small caption noting the place doesn't even have it. Hiro looks down, realizing how it is, before scanning the beverage bottles on the shelf and asking if there are any carbonated drinks. Elma tilts her head in complete confusion, utterly blanking at the terminology as she asks what carbonated even means. Hiro frantically tries to clarify, asking if they have bubbly drinks like cola and soda. Elma crosses her arms with a totally flat, unimpressed expression, stating that she has never heard of that. The shocking revelation hits Hiro like a physical lightning bolt, sending him dropping straight down onto his hands and knees in pure, unadulterated despair as he screams in terror. Slouched completely over on the floor, Hiro dramatically groans that God is dead. His mind races into a frantic spiral of panic, desperately questioning how carbonated drinks don't exist in this galaxy, wildly theorizing if it's due to zero gravity or a problem with the pressure. Gripping his head in agony, he shouts that he can't even begin to comprehend it. Elma can only bend down and rest her hands on her knees, staring at his explosive mental breakdown with a look of pure bewilderment as she asks what is wrong. Hiro slowly staggers back to his feet, his face completely pale and shadows casting over his eyes as his mind fixes on a new realization. He imagines a planet's residential area, visualizing a citizen purchasing a bottled beverage from a vending machine, realizing that they might still be circulating as usual on actual planets. Elma looks up at his sudden, silent shift in energy, crouching low as she anxiously asks if he's alright, completely unaware that her clueless newbie has just found a brand new purpose in the cosmos. With an intense, passionate look on his face, Hiro tightly grips his gloved fist to his chest as he loudly declares his ultimate ambition. He yells with absolute conviction that he is going to buy a detached house with a garden on a planet. Below him, Elma remains crouched down on the floor, looking up at him with sweat trickling down her face. She stares in total deadpan silence, completely flabbergasted by the newbie's sudden, dramatic declaration over wanting a home on a planet just to find his favorite drinks. Elma sweat drops heavily, looking completely baffled as she asks Hiro how on earth he came to the sudden conclusion of buying a planet home. She flatly dampens his mood, pointing out that a plot of land and citizenship is going to cost hundreds of millions of Enel. Hiro looks down, sweating slightly as he processes the astronomical price tag. Shortly after leaving Oishi Mart with their groceries delivered straight to the ship, Elma sips her drink, proudly boasting about her store choice. Hiro looks on as she tells him to thank her, admitting that the direct delivery service is highly convenient for spaceship crews. The relaxed stroll comes to a sudden halt as they peer down a secluded side alley. A group of 3 thuggish men are actively cornering an unarmed woman, violently gripping her arms as she desperately screams for them to stop. One of the thugs tells her to be quiet already, while another smirks that she is pretty good looking, telling the crew to hurry up and do it. Witnessing the assault, Hiro's eyes widen in sheer shock. Without a second thought, his hand drops straight toward the heavy firearm resting at his waist as he moves to intervene. Before Hiro can draw his weapon, Elma's gloved hand suddenly clamps firmly onto his wrist, forcing him to stop. Hiro looks back at her with a sweating, frantic expression, aggressively demanding if she is telling him to ignore what is happening right in front of them. Elma remains completely cold, looking away as she points out that an unarmed girl being in a dangerous place like this tells you all you need to know. She delivers a harsh dose of reality, stating that even if Hiro saves her right here, she isn't going to survive by herself anyway. Elma firmly pulls Hiro away, guiding him down the street while explaining that these types of grim situations are a common sight all over the galaxy. Hiro looks over his shoulder in deep conflict, watching the crowded colony residents casually walk past the alleyway, completely ignoring the girl's plight. Elma looks back at him, bluntly asking if he intends to stick his neck out every single time he sees something like that. She looks straight ahead, dropping a heavy reminder that he is just a mercenary, not a hero. Back in the alley, the terrified girl looks on in pure despair as the thugs pull her away, tears streaming down her face as she reaches her hand out into the empty air. Hearing Elma's words, Hiro looks down, quietly admitting that she is completely right. But just as Elma smiles and thinks she has successfully convinced him, her expression instantly twists into pure shock as a sharp metallic click echoes through the air. She looks down to see Hiro's holster completely empty, realizing he has already unlatched his sidearm. Tearing away from Elma, Hiro lunges backward into the alleyway with a fierce grin, raising his heavy laser handgun and pointing it straight at the head of the lead thug. He shouts out with mocking energy, asking the criminal if he was actually going to say that a single hit is all it takes to make the girl stop struggling. The main thug freezes in mid-sentence, his arrogant smirk instantly vanishing as he finds himself staring directly down the glowing barrel of a high-tech military weapon. Without a single moment of hesitation, Hiro pulls the trigger, unleashing a brilliant flash of energy that grazes the main thug's hand. The blast explodes into the brick wall behind them, showering the alleyway with high-velocity stone debris. The lead criminal drops to his knees, clutching his smoking, injured hand as a terrified screech tears from his throat. The remaining 2 thugs spin around in absolute panic, sweating profusely as they look back to see who just disrupted their ambush. Hiro stands firm at the entrance of the alley, looking down at his smoking gun as he casually mutters that he actually hit him, wondering if his accuracy is from practicing so much in the video game simulator. The injured thug growls in agony, while his partner steps back in fear, shouting at Hiro. Hiro sharply raises his gun again, locking his sights directly onto the remaining gang members as he loudly commands them to get out of here, fiercely warning them that his next shot isn't going to be on the lowest power setting. Terrified of being vaporized by an elite mercenary, The thugs grab their injured leader and frantically sprint away, shouting curses as they completely abandon their target. Hiro lowers his gun, letting out a tired sigh as the rescued girl remains slouched on the floor, staring up at him in utter disbelief. Elma approaches the scene, clutching her grocery bags tightly as she fixes Hiro with a deadpan glare, bluntly asking him what exactly he plans on doing with that girl now. Hiro completely sweats, looking away as he mutters that he doesn't know. Hiro looks down at the shivering girl, who remains curled up on the ground, clutching her clothes in silence. Placing his hand behind his head, Hiro lets out a strained, nervous laugh, flatly repeating that he really has no idea what to do next. Elma stands with her hands on her hips, looking on with an entirely unimpressed, exhausted expression, leaving Hiro completely stuck dealing with the real-world consequences of playing the hero. The rescued girl sits down nervously, looking downward with a deeply worried, sweating expression as she clutches her top. Across the table, Elma casually rests her chin on her hand, taking a quiet sip of her drink through a straw. Hiro looks on with a strained, sweat-drenched smile, trying to keep the mood light after the chaotic alleyway rescue. Elma pulls the straw from her mouth, casting a deeply cynical, side-eyed look at the girl, before delivering a heavy, lingering sigh. Elma flatly states that she doesn't know what to do next, leaning back as she casually tells Hiro that since he saved her, he needs to figure it out. Hiro's face drops into a dark, sweating glare of absolute disbelief. Elma turns her back completely, carrying her shopping bags as she walks out of the booth, flatly tossing out a lazy goodbye. Hiro's expression immediately brightens into a wide, cheerful grin, loudly calling out that he finally gets it. Hiro deliberately speaks up in a loud, dramatic tone, sighing deeply as he states that Elma must just be a cold person who ruthlessly abandons her troubled subordinates. He turns to the rescued girl, carrying on about how he truly believed Elma was a generous senior he could always rely on, causing Elma's pointed ears to instantly twitch in irritation. Hiro keeps the act going, loudly proclaiming that he'll just have to go ask the old guy at the Mercenary Guild counter instead, confidently smiling as he boasts that he can count on him way more than a cold, sly, flat-chested space elf. Elma completely snaps, her face twisting into pure demonic fury as she lunges back into the booth, grabbing Hiro tightly by his collar and screaming that she will kill him. Hiro merely smiles with his eyes closed, laughing that helping out would be a perfect way for her to pass the time anyway. The rescued girl waves her hands frantically in absolute panic, desperately trying to de-escalate the explosive screaming match. Finally letting go, Elma sits down with her arms tightly crossed, looking away with an annoyed pout. Hiro leans forward, asking the girl for her name, prompting her to quietly reply that it's Mimi. Elma rests her chin on her hand again, directly asking Mimi if she has any family or anyone at all in this colony that she can count on. Mimi looks down with a grim, downcast expression, quietly whispering that she has absolutely no one. Hiro shifts in his seat, sweating as he notes that if she truly has nowhere left to go, he might have an alternative. Elma cuts in, staring deeply into Mimi's eyes as she drops a massive offer, calmly revealing that Hiro can actually let her stay aboard his starship for the time being. Elma points a finger straight at Hiro, explaining to Mimi that this guy is a professional mercenary who owns a fully independent spaceship. She turns back to Mimi, demanding to know if she possesses any useful skills. Mimi stammers out a nervous confirmation, looking entirely bewildered as she asks what specific skills they are talking about. Elma closes her eyes tightly, cutting her off to state that her hesitant answer tells her everything she needs to know, guessing that all she can really do is basic personal care like cooking and laundry. Elma casually carries on, flatly adding night companion to the list of basic duties, causing Hiro to instantly spit his drink all over the table in absolute shock. Mimi's face flushes into a deep, burning crimson as she frantically screams that it's dirty, furiously questioning what Elma means by night duties. Hiro coughs into his hand, his face completely red as he asks Elma what else she is possibly after. Elma's expression instantly hardens into a cold, fiercely serious stare, stating that there aren't any idiots in this star cluster who will willingly help useless strangers without an underlying reason. Hiro quickly turns to Mimi, waving his hands frantically as he stammers out a desperate apology, firmly promising her that he has absolutely no intention of doing anything like that. Mimi slowly looks up, her face completely drenched in sweat and burning with pure embarrassment as she stares at the table in silence. Elma watches the display with a totally deadpan, unimpressed look before turning her focus back to the girl. She notes that she can't force her to do anything, but asks Mimi point blank to reveal if she grew up here in the colony's dangerous third block. Elma calmly explains that the sketchy lower sectors are absolutely no place for a naive, sheltered girl to be strolling around alone, asking her to explain what exactly happened to her. Mimi tightly clasps her hands together in her lap, her shadow casting over her eyes as she reluctantly begins to recount her past. She reveals that she actually came from the wealthy second block where she lived a very happy, completely average life alongside her loving parents. A tragic memory flashes across Mimi's mind, recalling the dark day when both of her parents suddenly passed away. They were professional technicians in charge of servicing the colony's critical oxygen infrastructure, but a catastrophic work accident tore the facility completely apart. To make matters worse, the local authorities ruthlessly blamed her parents for the mechanical failure, saddling Mimi with an astronomical debt for reparations that far exceeded her entire family inheritance. Mimi continues her heavy story, walking with her single suitcase as she notes that a mere student like her had absolutely no way to earn that much money. Unable to pay the steep residence tax of the second block, the system ruthlessly chased her out into the dangerous slums of the third block. Elma stays silent, resting her chin in her gloved hand as she processes the grim tale. Hiro looks on in utter disbelief, sweating as he asks if a crazy situation like that can actually happen in this universe. Elma turns a lazy, side-eyed glance toward him, asking if he somehow managed to forget that basic galactic law too, noting it's pretty common. Elma remarks that Hiro was probably an elite rich guy himself before he lost his memory, but emphasizes that right now, Mimi has absolutely zero options left to her. Mimi looks downward, a heavy stream of tears quietly pouring from her eyes as she faces the absolute hopelessness of her life. Elma watches the display in a quiet, analytical silence, before shifting her sharp gaze back over to Hiro. She tests his resolve one final time, bluntly asking him if he is truly serious about getting involved. Hiro's face twists into a fierce, wide grin, a heavy bead of sweat trickling down his cheek as he makes his final decision. Determined to challenge the system, he takes Mimi straight to the third block's public management office to settle her bureaucratic nightmare once and for all. Sitting across the desk from a cold government worker, Hiro slaps his hand down onto the counter, aggressively demanding to know if the official is actually serious about the numbers. The glass-wearing agent adjusts his spectacles, flatly telling them to wait while he checks the digital records one more time. Looking over his tablet, the official breaks down the crushing financial breakdown, listing off the poll tax, the residence tax from the second block, and the heavy late fees accumulated from the unpaid reparations. Adding the free movement tax on top of that, he brings up a staggering grand total of exactly 500,000 anel. Mimi slouched over in her chair, staring blankly at the table as the man smugly declares that this massive sum is the exact price of her freedom. Hiro breaks into a nervous sweat, mentally calculating that since 1 NL equals roughly 100 yen, this corrupt system is demanding a massive 50 million yen from a completely helpless minor. Hiro tries to argue, leaning forward as he questions if there isn't some sort of basic legal system like a renunciation of inheritance or personal bankruptcy to protect her. The official bluntly shuts him down, stating that while those options exist, Mimi has completely passed the legal cutoff date. He cold-bloodedly explains that if she continues living in the third block, she'll technically be exempt from paying these charges, but it means she won't be able to receive any governmental services or protection. Hiro grows completely furious, yelling that a minor with no guardian thrown into a lawless slum will be completely destroyed. But the official remains entirely indifferent, telling him to stop making a scene. The government worker touches his glasses with a dark, sinister smirk, casually noting that while he's heard independent mercenaries can make a highly profitable living, 500,000 anel still isn't cheap. He leans in closer, casting a vile look toward the shivering girl as he tells Hiro that if he simply wants to have cheap fun with that kind of desperate female, there are far more affordable, seedy options waiting down in the third block slums. He narrows his eyes maliciously, telling the pilot to stop thinking beyond his means and just abandon her. The disgusting insult completely crosses the line, forcing Hiro to slam both hands onto the desk as he violently stands up from his chair with a loud crash. The sudden burst of pure fury catches the official completely off guard, his smug composure cracking as a drop of sweat forms on his face. Hiro stares the man down with an intense, burning glare, his voice low and dangerous as he firmly delivers his final answer. He tells the corrupt worker to process the transaction immediately, declaring that he will gladly take that fight. Outside the municipal building, Elma smiles and offers a warm welcome back. Hiro walks down the steps with a bright grin, raising a hand to say, "Hey." Elma rests a hand on her hip, noting his expression and chuckling that she doesn't even have to ask how it went. Behind Hiro, Mimi walks down the staircase, looking forward in silent, wide-eyed awe. Hiro happily confirms that he slapped the official with a knell, prompting Elma to smile and nod, remarking that it is exactly how a professional mercenary handles business. Elma turns toward Mimi, handing her a large shopping bag filled with clothes she picked at random. Mimi looks inside, her face lighting up with absolute joy as she offers a bright thank you. Elma flashes a small grin, playfully wishing her good luck since her troubles with the pilot are likely just beginning. As they prepare to split up, Elma leans in close, whispering some final advice into Mimi's ear that causes the young girl's face to flush red. Raising a finger, Elma sternly warns Mimi to stop Hiro from being so rash, bluntly pointing out that if he dies out there, she will end up right back out on the street. Hiro's sweat drops in the background, looking over in confusion as he asks if the warning is directed at him too. Elma waves her hand dismissively, announcing that she is heading back to her own ship. Hiro and Mimi watch her go, with Mimi offering a polite bow of gratitude. Soon after, Hiro takes Mimi to his flagship hangar, where the massive ASX-08 Krishna sits fully secured on the launch pad. Safely aboard the starship, Mimi finally gets to wash away the stress of the slums, standing under a hot, steaming stream inside the modern shower unit. She rests her arm against the wall, closing her eyes in sheer bliss as she tries to remember the last time she was even able to take a proper shower. Looking down at her clean reflection, a small smile forms on her face, thinking to herself about how incredibly happy she is. She gently clasps her hands together, softly offering a silent prayer of thanks to her new savior. Mimi lets out a quiet sigh, leaning her head against the shower wall as her expression softens into deep reflection. Reaching down, she firmly grips the metallic handle and twists the valve to shut off the water. Standing quietly in the center of the steaming stall, she stares down at her bare feet on the tiles in a lingering, emotional silence. After drying off, she steps out into the dimly lit, metallic corridors of the starship's living quarters, heading toward the main residential rooms. Meanwhile, over in the crew galley, Hiro sits at the table enjoying a freshly prepared dinner plate, taking a bite as he notes the quality. The meal features a piece of artificial meat covered in rich sauce, garnished with fresh asparagus and sliced cherry tomatoes. Hiro smiles, thinking that the high price was entirely worth it, noting that while the standard food cartridges weren't bad, this is a massive upgrade. Sitting across from him, Mimi blushes furiously and frantically waves her hands, loudly assuring him that she thinks the food is incredibly good when he asks if she doesn't like it. Setting her fork down, Mimi rests her hands in her lap and looks over with a curious expression, asking what exactly they are going to do after this. Hiro takes a sip from his glass, casually replying that he is going to take a shower and make formal plans for tomorrow's navigation. He flashes a warm, reassuring smile, telling Mimi that she should get some rest since she looks incredibly tired from everything that happened today. Mimi looks down at her plate, quietly offering a gentle confirmation as she agrees to do just that. Later that night, a shirtless Hiro sits on the edge of his bed with a towel draped around his neck, looking over a handheld digital tablet. He browses through an interactive map of the third block, rubbing his chin as he realizes he has a massive amount of shopping to do if he's going to live with Mimi long term. He smiles to himself, looking at a storefront image of Oishi Mart, noting that the sector is full of shady businesses selling suspicious products, making the clean supermarket Elma showed him one of the few proper establishments around. Hiro thinks to himself that while Elma is an unfortunate elf, she certainly wasn't lying when she called herself an experienced veteran. Suddenly, a sharp knock echoes from his electronic doorframe, catching him completely off guard. He turns around, calling out into the dark hallway to ask if it's Mimi. The automated door slides wide open, and Hiro's eyes widen in absolute sweat-drenched panic as he frantically lunges backward, screaming at her to hold on a second because he is only in his underwear. Standing at the open doorway is Mimi, wearing a thin, translucent nightgown that reveals her silhouette, her face completely flushed with embarrassment as she casts her eyes downward. Hearing his panicked shouts, she enters the room anyway, stepping forward onto the metallic floor. Hiro holds his hands up defensively, sweating profusely as his mind completely breaks. Before he can even process the situation, Mimi drops her head straight against his chest with a soft thud, leaving a completely frozen, blushing Hiro staring blankly into space with his mind filled with pure question marks. Hiro's eyes widen in absolute sweat-drenched panic as his face completely flushes, totally caught off guard as Mimi quietly mutters that she is here to fulfill her duty. He desperately tries to find his words, stammering out that he told her earlier this isn't what he meant. Mimi remains pressed against his chest, her small frame visibly trembling as she clutches her arms tightly. Hiro stares down in a quiet, stunned silence, noticing her wide, terror-filled eyes as she trembles violently in his embrace. Mimi stands barefoot on the metallic floor, her voice cracking as she finally breaks her silence to admit that she is terrified. Hiro looks down with a gentle, soft expression, reassuring her that she doesn't have to force herself to do anything, admitting that he has no idea what that idiot elf told her earlier. Mimi keeps her head buried against him, softly clarifying that it's not like she's scared of him or sleeping with him. She lets out a quiet breath, her voice dropping to a fragile whisper as she reveals the painful truth. She is simply terrified of being abandoned. Hiro's face turns entirely red, throwing his head back as he loudly promises her that he absolutely has no intention of doing anything like that, assuming she already knew his character. Mimi remains tightly locked in his arms, crying out that she is worried about being completely useless to him. She sighs deeply, admitting that if there was at least a single task she could properly do, she would feel a little more at ease. Hiro's frantic expression completely softens into a warm, understanding look. He reaches his hand out and gently rests it on her head, softly stroking her hair to comfort her. Mimi looks up through her tears, blinking in quiet confusion as she feels the comforting warmth of his hand. Looking down into her eyes, Hiro thinks about his next move, realizing he has to make up his mind about their future. Without saying another word, he wraps his arms firmly around her shoulders, pulling her into a tight, protective embrace. Standing together in the center of the dimly lit crew quarters, Hiro firmly holds the young girl close, completely melting away her deep fears of isolation with absolute reassurance.